What's going on, everyone? My name is Lucas Miller, host of the Fear-Free Passive Investing Show, the podcast, and I'm really excited to have you here today. Today's show is going to be all about what happens when the federal stimulus money runs out and tenants stop paying rent. So I get a ton of questions regularly from a lot of people, both active investors and passive investors, asking when this federal stimulus money runs out, the stimulus money that is more than some of them were making in their regular jobs, like the $600 a week. What happens when that money runs out, which is supposed to happen like this month or shortly after? Are tenants just going to stop paying rent? They're not going to have that money coming in, so are they going to stop paying rent? Now, everybody seems to think that this is going to be the end of multifamily. Everybody seems to think that tenants are just going to stop paying rent and they're just going to be done. And I have a little bit of a different theory. Now, let's back up a little bit before I started this. Before I even started investing in real estate a long time ago. Before that, I actually worked for a federal legislator whose job was to make laws, right? They worked for Congress and they made policy. That's what I did for him. I researched things, I created policy, I drafted memos, I came up with position points for him. And a lot of that gave me a lot of insight into how congressional offices think and how actually the executive and the legislative branch think, both the president and the Congress. Now, after that, I went and I worked as a lobbyist. And before you all start jumping down my throats, give me a break. I worked for landlords. So if you're a real estate investor, you should be thanking me for being a lobbyist. But that's beside the point. So being on the other side of things, I started to realize how lobbyists think and how they interact with legislators. And of course, I had kind of had a little bit of that beforehand, but it gave me another insight into how this works. Now, I have a very specific insight into this, a lot different than a lot of people do. A lot of people that are saying that this is going to be the end of multifamily, they don't have the same insight that I do. Now, I believe that common sense kind of says that that's unlikely. Tenants aren't just going to stop paying rent because money ran out. They might stop paying rent because their ability to earn money ran out. That's always a possibility. They might stop paying rent because it's not a priority in their lives anymore. That's a distinct possibility. And they might stop paying rent because, they didn't want to pay rent. That's all a possibility. But to say it's a blanket statement that tenants in general are just going to stop paying rent, I disagree with that. Let me explain. So the optics of this situation are really terrible. Think about put yourself in one of those 535 Congress people's shoes. Put yourself in their shoes. What are the optics of that going into an election year where some of them are going to be up for re-election? How is that going to look if the tenants stop getting money and start getting evicted, and landlords stop getting paid by their tenants and have to be foreclosed on or worse, sued? Think about that from that standpoint. This is not a situation where it's only going to happen to tenants or it's only going to happen to landlords. Typically, those aren't two people that are on the same side. Not always, but it happens. But think about that. Two sides of usually the political aisles are both going to be harmed by this situation. That means Republicans and Democrats both have an equal interest in resolving this. You have the Republicans who are generally pro-business. You have Democrats who are generally pro-individuals. Tenants' rights are a big tenet of what they believe. And so you think like that optic of that situation where tenants are getting evicted in mass and landlords are losing their businesses in mass, that's just not a great situation. So I truly believe that Congress and the president will do whatever is necessary to keep things status quo as much as possible until after the election. Now, I know that sounds dirty. I know that sounds like that's just not something you want to hear. But believe it or not, most of those people want to get reelected because that's their job, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that happens. If that means passing another massive stimulus bill, that's going to happen. If it means extending the unemployment benefits for past November, that's going to happen. No one wants to kick tenants out. No one wants to bankrupt landlords, and or majority aren't going to want to do that. So especially during an election year. So I believe that's going to make the situation a lot more complex than what some analysts or quote experts think is going to happen. I truly believe that they will come to some sort of agreement, most likely going to be an extension of unemployment benefits to those receiving them. Now, you and I could disagree or agree depending on your viewpoint, whether that's a good thing or not. I tend to believe that extending unemployment benefits and keeping people out of the workforce when they don't need to be is going to be very harmful for our economy. But I also believe that most people are going to prioritize having a roof over their head during these times rather than maybe something else. I think generally if you're making money, if you're making a paycheck, you choose to want to keep a stable housing situation, especially if you have a family. So I believe that there is a possibility of roommates increasing, cohabitation. Families that might not be living together will soon be living together. That's all a possibility. We saw that during 2008. Maybe some downgrading from Class A unit buildings, the brand new nice buildings, into maybe B buildings or C class even. But some other impact that we have no idea what it's going to be. But I don't believe that tenants en masse are just going to stop paying rent just because the unemployment benefits run out. I believe that most people are good people. They want to have jobs. They want to be earning money because money is helpful to them and money is helpful to everyone. And so that I believe that they will prioritize having a roof over their head and having a stable job over just stopping paying rent. Now, moving on to what I do believe is a threat to us as landlords or investors right now, are other impacts. Now, the biggest fear for me right now in the next 6 to 8 months is the looming election that's going to decide who runs this country. Now, I try not to get too political on the show because I don't believe that it factors into a lot of people's investing strategies. Now, I believe you can be right and I believe you can be wealthy, but very rarely are you going to be that at the same time. So there might be some things that you don't like and you just kind of have to hold your nose and deal with it as an investor, and that might be one of these situations. Now, the biggest fear for me is that one party controlling both the executive and the legislative branch. Very likely that is an increasing position. Now, why don't I like that, and why am I not singling out one party? Obviously, I have my own political views, and they're going to probably be different than a lot of people. But I believe that one party controlling, whether it's Republican or Democrat, is probably going to be harmful in one way or another. Now, if you're a Democrat and the Republicans have the majority, you're not going to enjoy that. If you're a Republican and Democrats sweep the House and the Senate and the legislative branch this coming election, you're not going to enjoy that either. The best thing that can happen to us as investors is status quo. And I know that's tough for some people to hear, but these are some of the things that are on the plate for certain parties, and it's like canceling rent, moratoriums on evictions, renter's bill of rights, which includes non-payment of back rent. So any coronavirus missed rent will not have to be paid and will be forgiven. So there's a lot of business-minded folks that are worried, rightfully so, about what's going to happen during this election season. But I think tenants en masse stopping paying rent is probably not super realistic for a lot of things. So there is my very brief but also very complex answer to if I think tenants are going to stop paying rent when the stimulus money or the extended unemployment benefits run out. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this put you at ease, but also made you a little more alert as to what could happen in the future. But if you enjoy these videos, great. I really appreciate it. If you're just stopping by, consider subscribing. We put out tons of content that is helpful to investors. And if not, no big deal. We don't do this for the money. We don't sell anything here. We don't do anything of the sort. I'm just here to educate you in hopes that you will continue building wealth for you and your family. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you watching the video. Let me know if I can do anything for you. Contact information is down below in the description. Let me know if I can help. Thank you.